we have our decision heard and most of all followed. So that's one of the rights that is recognized. And this is unless a treaty has been signed. So most of Canada has signed treaties, and this happened a long time ago, but since BC is on the west coast and we were the last nations that were colonized, there aren't a lot of treaties signed. So Sliammon, my nation, is going through the treaty process right now. And I was growing up around that from the time that I was a baby. That, you know, at that age, that's when you absorb the most, and it's when you look at the emotions behind each word and where that's aimed at. And so even then, I was aware that there was something broken in my community and something wrong in my community. Right now, in the treaty process, I was hearing about it as a younger child. I was just shocked from the corruption that we were receiving from the government and the corruption within our community. What has been happening is, since our community, most of the adults and most of the elders, they've gone to residential school and haven't received an education more than from past the 8th grade. So this treaty, we were denied the education to really learn about this treaty, what this is about, and for the most of it, what our nation knows about it is that it's self-governance. And most of our nation, they haven't really looked at the small details of this. And they don't know that they're not selling their land, only their land down the river by signing this treaty. They're selling the rights that were recognized in the Royal Proclamation of 1763. They're selling those basic human rights and those indigenous rights that were recognized. In the past few years, it's come to my knowledge that they were handing out illegal status cards to non-native people to say yes to treaty, to vote yes to treaty, without any consent of the nation. Our chief and council is signing with Enbridge, a pipeline corporation that's proposing the Keystone XL, the Northern Gateway Pipeline, that I'm very against, to coal bed methane in Powell Lake, which is a very important lake to our people. And the only way we actually found out about this is because it was on their website. Our nation wasn't aware of this. It was just the chief and council. Even since the age of just a baby, and it's really deteriorated over time, how divided our nation is. Our nation is now divided into anti-treaty and pro-treaty. It's sad because I don't get to see half of my family. And there's so much hatred that's dwelling because of what the government has done to us and because of the corruption within our own community and the fraud that is happening. The elders in Sliammon, which are the majority of people who are against this treaty, are elders, and so when they did blockade the treaty office where the voting was, the gym where the voting was going to take place, when they blockaded that, they were discriminated in such a terrible way. In my culture, you should never discriminate your elders in that way. So that's the division, that how our community and how our nation is really divided. And as I said, we're signing more than our land down the river. We're signing our rights, indigenous rights, and basic human rights. And from my generation as well, knowing about this, I can't help thinking, what is this going to do for my generation? What is this going to do for my people from the next generation? What is this going to be like? What's our nation going to be like in 2113? Once we sign this treaty, we won't have any jurisdiction over what happens on our land. A corporation can just come in and say, okay, we want to do this, and just give their proposal for what they want to do on our land, in our territory, and we won't be able to do anything to stop it. We're being dispossessed of our culture by signing this treaty. How are we supposed to eat a two-headed salmon? How are we supposed to harvest cedar, weave cedar into hats, into baskets? Half of being on the coast, and one of the nations along the coast, cedar is half of our way of life. That's most of our culture, where most of our culture is. And so, if this treaty were to be signed 20 years from now, with all the corporations coming in, logging our territory, destroying our territory, we won't be able to connect with that ecosystem, connect with that land the way that I was able to do, and even my kupa, my grandfather, my chicha, my grandmother, my dad, the way that they were able to do. The next generation, they may not be able to go onto the Sliammon territory without having to breathe with a hand covered over their mouth. They'll lose that sense of connection with that land that as humans we naturally have, and once that's lost, you're basically raising a generation that's not going to be aware or concerned about that land and about that territory, and they're going to be raising the next generation who is going to be raising the generations to follow. So we're being offered $20 to $30 million to sign this treaty just for our entire community. And is $20 to $30 million really worth the future of our people, worth my future, worth my cousin's future, and the children unborn? Is it really worth their future? So this is what I've struggled with, and this is what I've continued to struggle with. I've struggled with corruption, fraud, and all of this within our nation, and what has happened to our nation just is so tragic and so heartbreaking to me. But it's one thing I've learned with my fight for a better future, for my dream of equality and a sustainable future that harmonizes with the land. And that's my dream, to have that kind of future for the next generation to come. That it's one thing to fight for a dream, and it's another to fight for a future. And sadly, I have to do both.